Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Hello. How are you? Good afternoon and good evening. This is Professor Hamamoto on January 5th, year 2021, the day before the monumental session, the gathering, the mega gathering of January 6th. The star attraction, of course, being our beloved President, Donald John Trump. And I changed focus after talking with a friend this morning. I thought this might be instructive to clue you in a little bit about my working method, because I know myself, I enjoy watching these documentaries about the making of a movie or a musical, the behind the scenes. And I've been watching the Metallica channel, and it's really enjoyable watching them rehearse and practice and get their set really, really tight. So when they do their 3-hour-long shows, it really has a huge impact. So this is what happened today, the change of plans. I wasn't originally going to do a talk on the outer limits of the type of research I'm trying to put forward. But then I was talking to a friend this morning and said, hey, did you know that the Center for Disease Control, sometimes called the Center for Disease Creation, but the CDC issued a report stating that there were fewer deaths in 2020 than there were in 2019. And of course, any reasonable person would conclude that this whole crisis about the C word, right, is a fabrication. And most of us who are most of you who are watching this transmission and beyond, there's millions of people know that it's bogus, right? And this is the definitive evidence that we've been subjected to a complete psyops. However, that doesn't mean that there are thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Americans and people the world over that refuse to admit, mostly to themselves, but they want to save face also. They cannot admit that they've been hoodwinked, right? They've been taken, they've been had, so they have to pretend, play make-believe, so to continue the illusion. But for the rest of us, we're moving on with our lives, and the hammer's about to drop tomorrow. I think it's going to be more than a hammer. In fact, I wrote a short poem here, very short, because I don't like poetry either, in honor and in homage to our President Donald J. Trump, who will be at the Ellipse tomorrow, January 6th. And I want to talk about the occult significance of our President of the United States being at the Ellipse tomorrow. Here's the short poem. On the morrow, he will draw the sword, unreturned to its sheath until justice is meted out. Yes, I think our president's going to draw the sword tomorrow, so to speak. Just, metaphorically, of course. There'll be no violence, at least not on our end. So this has been brewing in my mind. I don't know why I didn't think about it earlier. Perhaps I needed to be put under the gun. It was only around 2:30 that I came up with this idea, and I worked like a demon in order to find all this literature that I'll present some of it for you in a moment. But I knew that Alex Jones, bless his American heart, you gotta love him. I know he's in for a lot of criticism here and there, and I'll have to disclose the fact that I'm favorably disposed to him, because it's really Alex Jones who kind of brought me to national prominence by having me on his show any number of times, as I was revealing how the university was degenerating from within. And the very show I was on, interview with Alex Jones, I laid out this term, weaponized multiculturalism, to talk about what now everybody knows, right? We all know about Trigglypuff and whatnot, and all that. There's a clown up at Portland State who has his own YouTube channel now because he wouldn't stay home when it said, all whites banned from campus. So now he thinks he's a civil rights hero, even though he's still a leftist dickhead. And then you got the Canadian dude, Jordan Peterson, who was plucked out of that to kind of be like, he's another leftist, by the way, and a psychotherapist and a Prozac advocate. He was plucked out sort of as like sort of controlled opposition on the left. So I'm telling you this because I've seen in my comments a couple of people telling me, hey, you should talk to that guy at Portland State. Him and his wife have a podcast about, you know, all this crazy stuff. And but you know what? We have zero in common. The only point of contact is that he's in academia, and so was I, or so am I. Yeah, that's the only. And same with Jordan Peterson. Someone said, "Yeah, you better reach out to Jordan Peterson because he's really on the same track as you." No, not at all. I repudiate all of what each of those individuals stand for individually and collectively. Jordan Peterson became a superstar and got. And I'm not envious, not at all. It doesn't matter to me that he has an agent, a talent agent with Creative Artists Agency or one of those. You know, I really don't care. But his claim to fame is that he would not use the pronoun, and all of a sudden there was a Jordan Peterson industry behind him. That's how it works. And I'm telling you this not to dump on these two clowns, but that's how, as you know, the media system works. This is how celebrity is manufactured, how it's engineered. Got that? So anyway, that's Alex Jones. That's how I was there first, on the Alex Jones show. He was perceptive enough. In truth, it was his intrepid editor, senior editor and writer and contributor, Paul Joseph Watson, who contacted me on the basis of a comment I had made, just kind of random, just like you're making comments, right? People read them and look what happened, right? All of a sudden I was thrust before millions of people talking about how the American university was heading down a wrong course. And I have proven to be right. And strategically, that also served notice to Janet Napolitano, who came from the Department of Homeland Security. It also served notice to the chancellor, the sleazy Linda P.B. Katehi, and all the other ass clown administrators who are after me, and including the psychotherapeutic mafia there that has taken control of all the universities and is exerting mind control experimental protocols on the undergraduates, and the foreign grad students and graduate students execute it. But it's all workshop in order to create Antifa, BLM, and all the craziness you're seeing coming out of the university. I was on top of that, and I was issuing warning to the American public what was unfolding. Strangely, not strangely, this is calculated on my part. I took an offensive posture. I attacked them instead of just letting them take pot shots at me and just sort of nitpick me to death and just kill me with the death of 1,000 cuts. I went after them. And as you know, Janet Napolitano finally left. She's in pretty bad shape physically, from what I hear. Linda P.B. Katehi, she was out of the university before I was. So the point is, it's not about me. It's the lesson here is that if you are threatened, if you are under fire, if you are under attack, if people have declared war on you without even you knowing it, you have to take positive action. And that comes from your head and your heart. That's where it comes from. And that's why I'm spending time with you today here and for the foreseeable future. And then, so thank you for Alex Jones, not just for bringing me to the public forum, but he donated like over $150,000 in order to pay for all the porta sands, the porta potties, and to build the bleachers and to pay for security, because all that expense that's incurred by President Trump appearing tomorrow has to come out of private monies. It's not paid for by the government. For example, the inaugural ball, that's not paid for by the public. We don't live in a monarchy, where all our money is, enough of it is, but all our money is taxed away in order to fund the extravagant lifestyles of the nobility. That's paid for by their own funds, of course. You know how that works, right? You get the donations from corporations, and then they own you. At least they think they do. They thought they owned President Trump, but they found otherwise. So thank you, Alex Jones, for donating that money and stepping forward and being so humble and modest about it. I could tell in watching your shows that you were reluctant to highlight your own contributions, but history will remember your generosity and your courage and the strength that you've exhibited for over almost 30 years now in bringing InfoWars and the prison planet concept to the American people. And I will tell you this, that when I came back from sabbatical from Okinawa, Japan in 2004, one of the first podcasts were new to me back then. One of the first podcasts I accidentally came upon was the Alex Jones Show. And I listened to him for the first week and I said, oh, this guy's nuts. He's crazy. He's a racist. He's, all the visceral reaction. Yeah. And then I started listening carefully. I said, yeah, he's making really good sense. And I've been a fan, short for fanatic, I guess, of a supporter of Alex Jones ever since that time. And so have many people around the world become avid listeners, viewers, because I say listeners because it started out as a radio show, right? But now it's a very well-produced, very nicely constructed, staged set studio that millions of people around the world are watching. And he stayed the course, and we're very grateful to him. And he'll be at the event tomorrow, and I'll be following it quite carefully. And then this morning, and George has been talking about it for the past, George Webb has been talking about it for the past couple of weeks. First it was on, then it was off, and then it became on again. But George, as you know, came to public prominence, not just to the public. He got into the sights of the national security state, largely because of the attention he was drawing at a charrette on Mystery Island. As soon as he started naming names and showing pictures of the principals who were involved in this whole crisis that we're now starting to emerge from, almost a year later, it's been only 9 months. Seems like 9 years, but it's only been 9 months. It was really about last March of 2020 where this really started to get underway. And by the way, I'd like to give a shout out to my friend and colleague, Ron Schofield, because it was Ron Schofield who designed and mapped out and proposed these playing cards that George started showing on camera. And by the way, I wrote the one-liner blurbs on each of them. So Ron and I worked very well together, and we got it in under deadline. 1 week, boom, it was out. But shortly thereafter, George was, I think he was deplatformed at that point, or he was attacked because he was reaching too many people. But as you know, and I know, you can't keep a good man down. He's like the unsinkable Molly Brown, right? You've seen the movie or the musical, and nothing can stop him. Nothing can stop the American people. So I heard John talking with George today. They're charretting now. They're at a charrette. They're on Mystery Island. George plunked down some money, tons of money, and invited select people there to join him and John and the rest of us who were looking in to study, to report on, to give us updates on this really monumental, epical event it's already underway. But the big event is I won't use that phrase, big event, because that's what national security forces, that was their code word for 9/11. They called it the big event. And we don't want anything like that to happen. And I'm here to report you nothing like that will happen because of the divine protect. This is not me saying this, because of the divine protection that the ellipsis itself will afford President Donald J. Trump and his supporters. It's no accident that of course, the ellipsis has been a central gathering point for a long time, which I'll get into, but it's no accident, it's no coincidence. It's just not a random choice that President Trump and his advisors, who, by the way, I think he has deep advisors that go beyond the sycophants, most of them who've gone away. But I think he has spiritual advisors, just like Roger Stone proved to have spiritual advisors that allowed him to emerge whole and intact and restored and rejuvenated. He's finishing a book, Roger Stone, on his experiences. after being hammered so badly. I think this is where President Trump is coming from, a position of power, a position of strength that does not depend upon the swamp creatures. And that's a lesson for all of us, right? So he has that protection of the ellipsis. Okay, so this is where I decided to change course and redirect my energies with your help, by the way, because some of you have a lot of knowledge of mathematics and engineering. Some of you might even have a little bit of background on architecture, landscape, or urban architecture, or occult architecture, which we'll talk about in a moment, or numerology, or you have a background in calculus. These are called the liberal arts, by the way. That's the idea of a liberal arts, is just a broad-based understanding, knowledge, appreciation, and application of mathematics, music, history, and language arts, and on and on. That's the liberal arts. And we're going to get back to the liberal arts under my leadership as Secretary of Education. I'm not kidding, right? This is for real. We're going to bring in the power of the intellect and the imagination, the creativity and the energies of the American people through education. Okay, so I checked into my my library of material here, and I'm taking a trip down memory lane just a little bit. Please indulge me, because my teaching experiences was the core of my professional life, and I valued it, not because of all the ass clowns I had to deal with in terms of colleagues and administrators and wannabes, and also obnoxious grad students. They're probably the most they're the most troublesome of all, because they're kind of in a middle ground here, and they're the ones that like to rat you out and report you because they feel so powerless, I guess, and they want to strike back at daddy. So even though I did not run my my business, my profession like a patron or padrone, far from it. I like to think I was pretty open about my my work. And anyway, so I came across a book during the course of my teaching career titled, I will share it with you, I have the exact title, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital. And I said, perfect. I have a background on this, not a specialist background. I'll give you some references in a moment about who you should really take a look at and read. And this is your assignment. I said earlier, everybody's involved here. I want you to go to your hometown, your small town, what big town, large town, city, and you do a walk around, and with new eyes, with new perceptions, and you look at the secret architecture of where you live, and I guarantee you will find it'll just completely revolutionize your perceptions here. And I'll give you a mundane example. You drive to any little town or large town in America, and you come, as you're entering the city limits, you'll see this kind of weird board with all these little insignia. Some says Freemasons, some say the Kiwanis Club, some say the Rotary. They're all slapped on there. And by the way, one of your assignments is to tell me what those boards are called. They must have a name for them. I'm sure it's not just called a billboard. I think it has some sort of specialized terminology that I couldn't find. So if you find out, please let me know. But you know what I'm talking about? They're on the outskirts of town. As soon as you drive in, and you know that these people, these groups, these organizations, these societies, right, operating in plain sight, these societies have marked off their turf. You're entering their world now. You're entering their reality, and they're announcing it to you because that's a metaphysical law, right? You're doing it willingly, right? You are consenting to entering into their turf, their realm. So anyway, the secret architecture of our nation's capital, and get this, the subtitle, and this is right in keeping, ladies and gentlemen, what I've been monologuing about for the past few days, right? Monologuing is not a word, but I'm just using it for the sake of fun. The subtitle is The Masons and the Building of Washington, D.C. And you all know this. You know this, but this is not news to you, those of you who are watching. If it is, I'm glad, I'm happy that you discovered the moon. But you don't have to put it in the comment that, yeah, I should be reading blah, 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 because I've been there and done that. But I appreciate your enthusiasm anyway. So here it is. I brought this to my class. I told them, hey, I know you're the sons and daughters of immigrants and refugees, primarily from Asia, Southeast Asia. And, I know that if you're Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian, that 2 million of your people were killed during the Southeast Asian wars, thanks to all these people who have occupied our nation's capitals since the end of World War II. But you really should know, and this is Professor Hamamoto telling you what America is really about, because you did not get this in your K through 12 education. They don't talk about the secret architecture of the nation's capital. Your civics and your history lessons are just restricted to the judiciary and the legislature and the executive branch. That's all you get, right? And that's why today, Americans are, oh, John Roberts is not doing anything. He must be blackmailed. Oh, the Supreme Court. Or our legislators, oh my, they get into personalities and they start getting into a whiny mode, right? Come on, grow up, please. This is the real world. This is how it functions. And I know that you were deprived of this information, this research, K through 12, and it was intentional. Because guess who sponsors a lot of public education? Yes, those very organizations that slap their insignia in front of your township there. Right? They give all these scholarships so that you will be hoodwinked. You'll have the hood over your face and not really know what's up. But it's never too late. I appreciate your interest and your initiative and sticking with it here. So check that book out. It's well worth it. I mentioned that I was going to cite another individual who I found really fascinating. He's doing original work. Most of your stuff on YouTube is not original. There are a bunch of repeaters, I call them, or earlier, the term is probably passé by now, but I haven't been teaching for a while. But they used to call them biters, right? Most of the people on YouTube are biters. And so please do not tell me in the comments to look and read and look at the YouTubes of biters, because I've been there and I've done that. And I purposely do not repeat what these people are saying. I want to present original information because I know your time is valuable, and I'm all about trying to take the ball forward creatively and intellectually and scholarly, instead of just rediscovering the moon, right? Okay, so check this book out. The person I'd like you to, who deserves more recognition and serious attention, is an individual by the name of Cort Lindahl, C-O-R-T, Lindahl. I think it's spelled L-I-N D-A-H-L. And he's especially of interest to me is because he's done a lot of the sacred geometry and geomantic analysis of where I live here in Northern California. So he talks about how the city or the town, I guess it's an incorporated city, but the city of Chico, where Cal State is, right? Cal State Chico, Cal State University Chico, CHICO, is up there. He talks about how it was laid out by these people from back east who have these Freemasonic backgrounds, and the whole city center is a miniaturized version of Washington, D.C., as it was conceived and overseen by the great French Masonic architect who laid out Washington, D.C., Charles L'Enfant, I believe is his name. And I think he was a Freemason because, he's a Mason. He knows that he's part of the trade. He's part of the craft. So that's Chico. Cort Lindahl also has a really good book on Shasta, Mount Shasta, where the aliens supposedly live in these underground cities. Whether you believe that or not, it doesn't really matter. The whole geomantic science, which is a lost, well, not totally, but it's an occulted art that's been pushed off purposely so that we are going in darkness or semi-darkness while the handlers get all the juicy information and use it against us to enslave us and repress us. So check that out. And remember, this talk is also very much complementary to the talk I gave on Lego, Techno-fascism, Lego, right? Lego. Because, and you can tell me this because I don't play with Legos. Maybe you do or know someone who does, but can you even make An ellipse with Lego blocks? Can you? Can you make curves? Can you make curvilinear structures? I know you can make a circle eventually. I mean, but it's very jagged. It looks like a giant pixelated piece of garbage. And it's certainly not as beautiful as these renderings using black ink, Chinese ink. They called it Chinese ink back in the Italian Renaissance period because it was specialized formulation secret, of course, occulted. Nothing as beautiful as that you would see of the nice proportions of the Roman architecture and later Renaissance architecture. So there's your Lego mentality, the componential bricks that fit together in the sort of brutal architecture. I think Bauhaus is probably the best example of that, right? I think one of its theorists of Bauhaus called homes machines for living. Thank you very much, but I'd rather not live in a machine. I'd rather live in a home. I'd rather live in a house, not a machine. Some of it's quite beautiful, some of it's nice, but I prefer, so far as modernists are concerned, I prefer our own indigenous genius, Frank Lloyd Wright, who, by the way, borrowed a lot of his principles from Japanese architecture. Not the poor people like myself who lived in shacks, but my family, but the merchant class people who had the nice homes and layouts and whatnot. Where does this word ellipsis come from? The first known use of the term ellipsis, and of course, it draws from Latin, of course, is in 1540, according to the Oxford Dictionary of the English Language. And it refers to, this is in grammar now, the ellipsis I just referred to as the geometric mathematical formulation here, but this is the grammatic application. That is the application of the term in grammar. And that is the omission of one or more words that are obviously understood, but that must be supplied to make a construction grammatically complete, right? Sometimes you'll see this rendered in a sentence, ... period. That's an ellipsis, a visual ellipsis. It's supposed to mean kind of a blank. Or even when you're speaking, the subject or the object is implied rather than articulate. That's all called ellipsis. Or in cinema, you'll often see ellipses. They're used in editing and cuts, right? Jump cuts, right? French New Wave film. All of a sudden, there's this and this, and there's a missing piece, but you put it together perceptually, mentally, and intellectually. You say, oh, something happened here, and the director's kind of forcing you to create the meaning for yourself. That's ellipsis. That's the productive creative use of ellipsis. Now, the reason why I'm talking about it here for this moment is that I think the metaphysical, the occult reason that President Donald Trump is going to be at the ellipsis tomorrow is to fill in the suppressed meaning of American republicism, not with a capital R, but with a small. He's filling in the meaning again. He's restoring the meaning to the silence that has been imposed on the American people through our gagging. They call them masks. They call them surgical masks, but are they not in truth more like gags? They are not only gagging our pie holes, right? But they're gagging perception and communication and understanding. So he is going to be the president and the commander-in-chief tomorrow. Will be saying, okay, I'm going to spell it out for you. Okay, you've been put on the elliptical trainer here by Google and Netflix and Amazon.com and all these other big tech, techno-fascist corporatists, companies that have subverted the American republic, and they are they're more than a fifth column. They're like a sixth column. And I just invented a new term, sixth column. Those are techno-fascists that have taken root within the country and subverted it and made their own empire within a nation state. So all you political scientists out there, you're going to have to reconceptualize your discipline, because now we have a sixth column. And President Trump is going to be, tomorrow, he's going to be hacking away at that sixth column. the techno-fascists, the Legos, the Amazons, the Facebooks, you name it, right? And we're going to be hacking along with them. So that's the metaphysical reason why President Trump is going to be there at the ellipsis, filling in the blanks with the ellipsis form serving as his protection there. And by the way, when I say protection, I'm not speaking in strictly metaphorical terms. Let me explain what I mean by that. I'm saying quite literally, protection, as in military protection. Let me see if this article that I just went through a whole bunch of articles. I ripped through them very, very quickly today. I found an article. Okay, this is the ellipsis. The ellipsis. And by the way, I'm going to send my Patreon supporters. Please subscribe if you're able to. You can get in quite cheaply, and you're going to get all the bonus material. But I'm going to send the bonus material to my supporters on Patreon. You're going to get the articles. You're going to get some maps, some reproductions of the ellipses drawn in Chinese ink on vellum, on really high quality paper that's been scanned. It's in the People's Library of Congress, and so you can see how the architects were conceptualizing the ellipsis way back in 1850, something like that. Okay, so the ellipsis is going to protect our commander-in-chief. This is how, and I found this in an academic journal, right? I'm not for destroying all those useless degrees over, and I'm not about that. I think universities were salvaging, to put it lightly. And here's an example. It comes from Nexus Network Journal, 2014, fairly new. It's a journal of architecture and mathematics, and it's a letter from the guest editor. And guess what? The title it's military architecture and mathematics, right? This is the liberal arts, man. Architecture, mathematics, the occult information, history, design, all of it. That is the liberal with a capital L, not libtards. I mean, they stole that word from us. Let's bring it back to where it really comes from. It comes from the Western epistemological, scholarly, historiographic, intellectual endowment that we inherited and that has been stolen from us and covered up, occulted, that is, masked by all this identity politics and such studies and this studies and the rest of it. And I'm not a reactionary, by the way. I believe in all these different areas. Women's studies, for example, ethnic studies, I believe is very important. Cultural studies, yeah, it's okay, but they've all been hijacked, as I mentioned before. So here's the title of the article: Military Architecture and Mathematics by Marco Giorgio Bellivacqua, right? Published 2014. And this is a credible piece. It's only 5 pages long. I'll send it to the patrons here. It says, the use of firearms and warfare techniques from the early 15th century forward, that is, triggered a progressive and radical renovation of a system of fortification, which until then had remained essentially unchanged since antiquity. So all of a sudden there was a sea change in fortification. High walls, towers, and moats, elements of an archetype based on the plunging defense, quickly showed their inadequacy to resist the new techniques of attack, the purpose of which was to breach the walls rather than climb them. A very lively season started, supported by the cultural spirit of the Italian Renaissance. In little more than 1 century, it led to the conception of a new system of urban and territorial defenses. And that's how the article starts out. And I go, man, this guy's a genius. How did he figure this out? How did he nail it down? And how did he come up with the explanation that we went to these big, giant, bulky castles that we see in all those cheesy movies from Hollywood in the 1950s, right? Robin Hood and all that. By the way, the English castles of old were not anything like that. You'd be surprised how primitive they were. In Buckingham, all that stuff came much, much later. So it's pure genius, and it shows how the military requirements in the city states are beginning to emerge in order to protect themselves from other marauders and would-be chieftains of these, not chieftains, these are like, we're talking about kings and queens at this point, and princes and dukes who are vying for power at this point, and how it affects architectural theory and practice. And also you can see why a craft like Freemasonry becomes so important. It's like being a genetic engineer in 2020 when you think you can go in there and dick around with the substance of life itself. You can imagine how much occult power you think you've amassed for yourself. So let me just read a highlighted section here before I move on. These experiences, which were at first genuinely and exclusively Italian, spread throughout Europe beginning the second half of the 16th century, thanks to the circulation of treatises that became increasingly specialized with the passing of time. Experiments testing on the battlefields found place in theoretical models. So theory and practice, there's a dialectical movement between the two. This laid the foundations for a progressively autonomous science, the science of war, which found in geometry the scientific basis for predicting the effectiveness of a design. Let me read it again. This laid the foundations for a progressively autonomous science, the science of war, which found in geometry the scientific basis for predicting the effectiveness of a design. Right. That's the core of the argument here. And before I leave you here, I might forget, so I will just mention to you in passing, and if I have time at the end, I'll throw some more information out there. But I think one of the revelations that our commander-in-chief will be making tomorrow, you'll be alluding, perhaps in veiled language, you'll be alluding to what we know as U.S. Space Force. U.S. Space Force. Just as there was a sea change in the way of doing war and protecting city-states when we were fighting in three-dimensional space and time, we are now in the cyber age where three-dimensional warfare has been proven dramatically with the theft of the recent election to be woefully inadequate with an enemy that we can't really see, right, on the field of battle. They're because they're not there, right? So here this is where a new approach of doing war and defense and a new architecture of society and life, perhaps, if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves enslaved by it. So we shouldn't let down our guard when President Trump continues into the second term. We have to hold him and others accountable, right, at all points. Otherwise, we will be enslaved, just like we almost were enslaved this go around. This is the U.S. Space Force, and as you know, President Donald Trump and Commander-in-Chief Donald Trump has been very aggressive in advancing the agenda of the U.S. Space Force, and I have all kinds of interesting literature that I will share with my Patreons. One of them, I'll just read you the title. This is issued by the Air Force Space Command, the U.S. Air Force, in 2004. This is quite a while ago. And this is only volume 1. There's 2 volumes, and each volume is over almost 800 pages long, ladies and gentlemen. They've got it together. They have the sword, metaphorically speaking. So be vigilant, but all this hype about the Chi-Coms this and Chi-Coms that, and they're taking over and all this stuff. Well, yeah, be vigilant, but don't go into a panic. The title is Orbital Futures, subtitles, Selected Documents in Air Force Space History, Essays and Commentaries by David N. Spires. This is in the public domain. If you can try to find it if you want. I've done the work for you, for my Patreon people, my patrons who are generously subsidizing these efforts because they don't come cheaply. I have to buy these. Well, they're public domain, but they're behind these paywalls. Anyway, that's one example. This whole new way of warfare People call it cyber war, but it's much more than that. There's a straight line that connects it to the great occult scientists of the classical age, including people like Johannes Kepler, and these people who are writing about it, who are conceptualizing it and theorizing it in the U.S. Air Force. They know that. And here's an example. Here's the title of the article: Continuing Kepler's Quest. As a Johannes Kepler, right? Continuing Kepler's Quest, Assessing Air Force Space Command's Astrodynamic Standards. And this is published in 2012. You're not going to get this in other YouTube channels, ladies and gentlemen, because those people are reading something that's, ancient old news. And this here, but you can find it. I've done the work for you. This is from the Congressional Research Service, which is really good for a federal government entity. I'm surprised that they haven't been compromised like the other federal agencies, like the FBI, CIA, NSA, and the rest of them. But anyway, the Congressional Research Service, I tip my imaginary hat to you. And there's a whole article here, August 6th, and I'll send it to, because it's public domain. I'll give it to my patrons here. It's toward the creation of a U.S. Space Force. Yes, it just lays it out here and gives you the legislation. It's done in layman's language, so it's not, believe me, it's, I can absorb it. I can understand it. Here's a book here, 204 pages, The U.S. Air Force in Space, 1945 to the 21st century. So they're on their game here. And I think all the fright tactics about the Chacoms are going to take over this, and we need to go over there and protect our hegemony and in the South China Sea and the East China. We got to, by the way, who appointed the United States as the guardian of East Asia? Maybe Japan or South Korea should bear the brunt of it. Why does the U.S. have to do it to project our power there? Yeah, that's probably it. But more likely to subsidize all these people who are preying on the military-industrial complex as their business model, not defense model, business model. Okay, because I want to get you into in front of the computer screen to see George and John doing the update on the McDuff _2020 show, which starts at straight up 5 Pacific Coast Standard Time. So I'll leave you with this article, and again, I'll post it on my Patreon page here because it's public domain. Just to tell you, and by the way, when I'm Secretary of Education, we're going to be revisiting the liberal arts curriculum. Right. And we're going to talk about mathematics, not just as some arid, sterile intellectual exercise, but as part of a cultural, a civilizational history. We would not be here with all these great insights of all these fantastic, I don't know, they probably wouldn't call themselves geniuses. They were just people, right? Okay, here it is, the article, The Ritual Origin of Geometry, right? What did I start this talk out with? The occult significance of the Ellipse gathering, January 6, 2021. It's all about occultic information and knowledge and wisdom. It's all about ritual, mythology, symbols, right? They exist on these two complementary planes. You got your technocrats, though, who have just presenting you one part of it so they can keep the other part of it for themselves. But we're going to bring it together. Correct, and we're going to push it forward as a result, and we're going to use these technologies, these advancements, these innovations for pro-human purposes, not for anti-human exterminationist eugenics purposes and purposes of control, but for purposes of freedom, of liberation. That is a human destiny. We know this, and we owe that to the insights and the struggles, the political as well as intellectual and creative struggles of people. From the late Middle Ages through the Renaissance and the age of revolution in the modern period, where this is all being hammered out on the battlefields, right? There were not just wars between men and armies, but these were wars of ideas. These were wars of the fate of human society, what direction where we're going to take it, right? Where we going to go towards liberation, or we're going to go to further slavery and darkness? And we're at that fateful decision point ourselves here. And I personally am quite excited by it. I'm energized by it. And I can't tell you how to feel about it, but I think all of us should just take a moment and just think about how incredible it is that we are all alive in this moment in time, in this space and time. We're right here, we're living it. We are experiencing it firsthand. We're not reading it in a history book. We're not watching it in some movie, reading about, the barbarians, courtesy of Netflix. No, we're living it. And even better, we're not only living it, but we're shaping it. We're producing it. We're making it. We are involved. This is a republic. This is a democracy, which is messy. It's ugly. It's contentious. Sometimes it's violent. But baby, that's the nature of human civilization, of human existence. So you better get used to the idea and get your chops together so that we can take it further, right? So here's a great article, 40 pages, The Ritual Origin of Geometry, A. Seidenberg. And I don't know when this is published, but the typography looks like comes from the 40s or something. But dig this, introduction. You know something about Pythagoras, probably more than me. It's the first chapter 1. That's where it all starts, according to this book or this article. Pythagoras, right? Square versus circle, doubling the cube, altars and plagues, building blocks. Hey, that sounds like Lego, right? I think my insight on Lego is correct. The postulates of construction, geometric algebra, Greece versus India, Cantor's view. And by the way, India has been plundered incredibly by what people call Western mathematics. India was really the home of modern mathematics from what I've read. Of course, English, the Royal Academy would never admit to that. It's always got to be England that has discovered everything, right? And on and on. So let's see here. Yeah, it goes into geometric principles of Baroque architecture. Francis Bacon was interested in sacred geometry, and as you know, Francis Bacon had devised this whole idea of America, what later became the United States of America, as the new Atlantis, right? And he wanted to see, and let's leave aside whether his vision is appropriate for ourselves. I think a lot of it's been distorted, but supposedly it was going to be a secular, scientifically run society free of Vatican meddling and superstition in a new age of light, enlightenment, of scientific rationality, the new Atlantis. However, as you might remember from the mythology, it is said that the continent or subcontinent of Atlantis, which has been discovered more than once, one of the reasons why it sank is because of their own hubris in trying to create a society of technology rather than human beings. And eventually it destroyed them. And that's why Atlantis became known. We don't want that to happen in the United States. And we don't want the Georgia Guidestones edicts to run our lives either. Anyway, that's Francis Bacon. These people all understand the principles behind the sacred ellipsis and the elliptical movements. It's also planetary. We talked about the great conjunction of December 21st, ushering in a new era of human endeavor, as my friend Masaki Miyagawa calls it. It's Aquarius. It's chaotic. He says that we're in for more chaos. But as I pointed out to him, and I think he agrees with me, chaos also means opportunity, right? It also means that something forms out of chaos. And in fact, isn't that the Masonic slogan, order out of chaos? But it's not Masonic. It's not their unique property. It's a metaphysical law. They just hijacked it for their own particular use, or used it, let's say, exploited it. I won't say hijack. So I have all these documents I found just to sum it up here. Yeah, there's some drawings from 1851 and the times of President Andrew Jackson of the Capitol Mall, drawn here of the ellipsis, right? The plan showing the proposed method of laying out public grounds at Washington, 1850, right? So President Trump's going to be there tomorrow. The map of the ellipse at White Lot, it's called DC. This comes from your Library of Congress, our Library of Congress. Contributor names. This map was created in 1882. So President Trump is following the historical trajectory of the American Republic. He's in that tradition. He's a disruptor. The United States of America, the founding of the Republic, was a great disruption of the oligarchies of the past, right? Of the monarchies, of traditional world historical sources of oppression of people, of everyday people. That's the vision. That's the concept that President Trump has been attempting for the past 4 years at great risk and under great duress and hardship imposed by these forces of darkness. This is what President Trump and Commander-in-Chief Trump has been trying to execute over the past 4 years. And this is where he will take us further into the next 4 years. All right. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, tune in and see if some of my observations bear out tomorrow. I know I'll be watching very carefully with you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Peace out. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.